Wie gut regulieren wir uns eigentlich durch diese Welt aus Leistungsdruck und Dauerablenkung?
Und die gute Nachricht ist ja schon mal, Selbstregulation kann man lernen. Und sie lässt sich in Bildungssysteme auch einbauen. Und die weniger bequeme Nachricht ist, dafür müssen wir manche Routinen, Strukturen und Prioritäten auch wirklich verändern.
Unser nächster Speaker arbeitet genau an dieser Schnittstelle. Wie lernen Menschen, sich selbst zu regulieren? Und was bedeutet das für Bildung, Beruf und Leben? Professor Dr. Jeff Greene ist Professor für Bildung an der University of North Carolina und hat das Konzept Self-Regulation in Education maßgeblich mitentwickelt.
Und seine heutige Keynote trägt den Titel Self-Regulation in Education, the Foundation of Successful School, Work and Life. Und wir laden Sie ein, dabei konkret mitzudenken, welche Momente in Ihrem Alltag könnten zu Trainingsfeldern für Selbstregulation werden, ohne dass Sie gleich alles umwerfen müssen. Herzlich willkommen, such an honor to have you here. Give it up for Professor Dr. Jeff Greene. Welcome.
Thank you very much. Good afternoon. There you go. Thank you very much. So make sure you're awake after the coffee and everything else. It is an honor and a pleasure to be here. Thank you for the invitation. I'm very excited to be speaking today. I think you'll see that some of the things that I'm saying connect very well with what Professor Jones spoke about, and will connect very well with what the students also presented in their video. And I was so impressed with what they had done in such a short period of time. Excellent leadership to help those students perform so well. And those students were doing things that we would love to see all students doing, expressing themselves, showing leadership, showing agency. And one of the things that I want to talk to you about today is how self-regulation really can help students bring out the best in themselves, help us better understand how to support them, and help them become the kinds of citizens that we all want them to become in the future. So I'm going to begin today with a bit of a provocation. I'm going to begin with something that's a little challenging, perhaps a little bold, and then I'm going to try to convince you of it. I'm going to argue that educators can prepare students to be irreplaceable in the generative AI future, that we can help students become essential to the world that generative AI is affecting, that amongst all of the talk and concern about all kinds of digital technologies, including generative AI, that we have the unique and wonderful opportunity to help our students maintain their important place in our world. And all of you here today have such an amazing opportunity to lead that here in Germany. I'm just thrilled to be able to talk to you about it. There's been a lot of talk that generative AI could replace learning and workers, concerns that generative AI is dulling our minds, that it is somehow causing us to offload our mental processing in ways that are not healthy. There are arguments that generative AI can make better textbooks and help people learn more effectively than humans can. There are arguments that generative AI is already smarter than we are, and in that kind of world, why have education at all? Maybe we should just have a permanent coffee break and let the generative AIs do their work. And of course, there's ideas that generative AI is changing the world of work, the things that we hope our students learn and take with them into their careers. There's concerns that those jobs may be changing or even going away. And then finally, there are arguments that generative AI is replacing teachers. So in the United States, there is something called Alpha School. This is a private school that claims that students can use generative AI and in just 2 hours learn as much or better than what students in a traditional classroom learn in 6 hours. And critically, Alpha School claims they need no teachers, just generative AI. I think we all should not believe that hype. So what I want to talk to you today is how self-regulation is so critical to understanding what we should be doing in this new but very manageable world. And indeed, there is a hype cycle, a cycle of inflated expectations, When it comes to artificial intelligence, you don't need to pay too much attention to the details on the screen there, but there is this sense that in 2025, we were at the peak of inflated expectations, and now in 2026, I think we're edging into the trough of disillusionment, but the plateau of productivity is out there, and I think we can achieve it. And that plateau is going to involve using generative AI to augment human intelligence, to complement human intelligence, to help amplify human intelligence, not replace it. And as I and others have argued, people who know how to self-regulate their own learning are the ones that will be able to make the most of what generative AI has to offer. Yes, humans are still needed in the generative AI future. And a term that I really like is this idea of hybrid intelligence, combined intelligence. So Dr. Sana Järvelä at the University of Oulu, along with her colleagues and others, have described what hybrid intelligence is and why it is so important. They have written that the danger is that AI will shape human behavior more than humans shape AI, and not in directions that foster human growth. We strive, they strive, I strive, I think we all should strive for a future where the relationship between humans and AI is synergistic, working together, rather than antagonistic, working against one another. By combining the strengths of both humans and machines, hybrid intelligence aims to create systems that outperform either humans or machines working independently. I believe that hybrid intelligence requires human agency, and human agency comes from self-regulation. And I am not alone in that. So you may be aware of recent innovations in what are called generative AI agents, who these automated agents can go off and do significant amounts of work on their own. And this is causing a revolution in fields such as computer programming, among other areas. Well, as the article quoted here says, the most valuable skill in tech is now deciding what agents should do. Self-regulation and the agency it allows are critical to telling generative AI what to do and knowing when it has been done well. So self-regulation is important in education and beyond. The definition of self-regulation is that it's how people actively monitor, adjust, and maintain the levels of cognitive, motivational, and emotional arousal in ways that fuel rather than derail the pursuit of goals, particularly in the face of challenges. Connects very well with what Professor Jones said earlier. What I like about this definition is that it includes cognition, motivation, and emotion. We know from ample literature that people do not just learn with their minds. They learn with their hearts and they learn with their bodies. And if any of those three things are not optimized, if any of those three things are not working well together, children, students, humans will have a harder time learning effectively. And so what we need to do is help educators, as Dr. Jones shared, help educators determine how to help students when they are out of balance, but also provide students with the tools and information they need so they can manage their own cognition, their own motivation, and their own emotions, in addition to behavior, as Dr. Jones talked about. There is plenty of evidence that self-regulation is important. You see here a book chapter that I wrote with my colleague Matt Bernanke and another colleague, Alison Hadwin. And Dr. Jones went over this. I'll just highlight it real quickly. Self-regulation, knowledge, skills, and dispositions predict successful transition into school, which can be very difficult, positive interpersonal relationships, financial success, career success, and it can protect against some things, such as psychological distress and negative technology effects. So I think we are, many of us, aware that as time has gone on, technology, which when I was young, felt like this wonderful thing that helped me learn more about the world and meet really interesting people and express myself and be creative, over time, that technology has started to feel like it's controlling us. That social media is telling us what to think, that generative AI is taking over our minds, that the internet is stealing our attention. Well, when students and humans can self-regulate, they can take back control from technology and take technology back to how I felt when I was younger. That technology was something that helped me be better as myself. Self-regulation can help us do that. There is also ample evidence for the importance of self-regulated learning, the application of ideas regarding self-regulation in learning contexts, be they formal ones like school or informal ones such as after school and beyond. Self-regulated learning skills predict academic achievement in primary and secondary school. Self-regulated learning interventions improve academic performance, as some people here at our conference today have shown. And it also predicts expertise development, something I'm particularly interested in. So when we look at expert chess players, when we look at Olympic athletes, when we look at professional chefs, when we study how people became experts and how they maintain their expertise, what we see is that they are self-regulating. It is a critical aspect of optimizing human performance, growth, and realization. And there's ample evidence for that I'm eager to share with you. Again, here's something that you don't need to look at too closely. It's a list of meta-analysis effect sizes. So as was mentioned earlier, meta-analyses are analyses of other studies. This work was done by Dr. John Hattie. Some of you may be aware his work is a little controversial, but for here it serves our purposes. He identified a number of things and tried to analyze if we were going to focus our attention on new things in education, what should we focus our attention on? And in this middle column, which again you don't need to read, it lists many self-regulated learning, skills, knowledge, and dispositions. So there is ample evidence that self-regulation is a really important thing that students should be able to do in school. But I'm going to share a story with you because even self-regulation researchers need to learn to self-regulate. So I have been honored and fortunate to have been invited to the University of Tübingen for many years by Ulrich and his colleagues. And I have to say, the first time I went, I wasn't so good at self-regulating that particular trip. I just kind of got on the plane and flew to Frankfurt. So you may recognize Frankfurt Airport here. I got off the plane. I didn't really have a plan on how to get from the airport to Tübingen. And I did not anticipate the jet lag and how confused I would feel at that time. I did not set up my cell phone to work with the internet here. So I couldn't go online and Google Deutsche Bahn and where do I go and what do I do. I began to panic a little bit and I was struggling to control that. And so I just started looking for someone to take me to the train. I just looked for someone that had a Deutsche Bahn jacket on. I said, please just put me on the train that goes to Tübingen. Not a very effective strategy. And I swore to myself that I would not do that again. Thankfully, I learned from my mistakes. So like a good self-regulated learning researcher, the next time I went to Frankfurt, well, first of all, travel with Matt Bernanke, my colleague. He came with me. He's very helpful. He regulates much better than I do. But I made a plan, right? So I tried to understand, okay, when I get there, what does the airport look like? Where do I need to go? I anticipated having jet lag, and so I printed things out. I made a good list for myself. I activated my cell phone before I got there, so I knew that if I needed to Google something, I could. When I felt my emotions getting the best of me, I had strategies to calm down and take it easy. I learned how to use Deutsche Bahn, so I didn't need to seek out someone just to kind of hold my hand and take me to the train. And it went much better, and I felt much better about myself and my ability to be successful here in Germany, at least getting from the airport to the city. So self-regulation are skills that I have studied my entire life. But the point I'm trying to make here is that when a student or a human is in a new environment, sometimes it takes a minute to transfer what they have learned to do in one context to a new context. So even self-regulation researchers sometimes struggle to self-regulate. Self-regulation in the classroom looks as Dr. Jones has talked about. So here we see two students. You might imagine that they're sharing a book, and at some point that one child may pull the book away from another. In that moment, we hope that the children can kind of control their emotions and find a good solution, like sharing the book further, inhibiting their negative reactions, and having a better experience overall. Students with strong self-regulation skills also have better relationships with teachers, as was mentioned earlier. It is easier for teachers to work with students that know how to self-regulate effectively. Again, we are not blaming students. We are not saying that students need to do all the work. But if we can create environments where students are more likely to self-regulate effectively and teach them the skills to do so, it increases the likelihood of a good outcome. In terms of learning, when a child maximizes their academic abilities, I argue that is self-regulation. So children who are effective at self-regulating their learning, they believe in their ability to succeed. They learn from their mistakes. They persist to realize their goals. They have clear long-term goals that they understand. Maybe a child wants to become a doctor. That's wonderful. That's a very long-term goal. That's probably very far away from this particular student. What are the intermediate goals that they need to know, that they can reach and strive for? People who are self-regulated know what those are. People who are self-regulated have thought about what their teacher wants them to do and make a plan to achieve the teacher's aims. They know how to understand their motivation from day to day and adjust it as needed. One of the big myths that I talk to teachers about is the idea that the only good motivation is intrinsic motivation. That's simply not true. When a child is intrinsically motivated, that is wonderful. I am happy for that child. I'm thrilled to watch that child pursue, but the reality is that no one is intrinsically motivated about every subject all the time, every day. In those moments or those contexts where maybe the intrinsic motivation is not there, can we help the child find other positive, adaptive kinds of motivation to be successful? Seeking out the value in what they're doing, understanding its importance. We can teach students how to do this, and that can help them in those moments where intrinsic motivation is not there to fuel them. Students who are self-regulated have good learning habits. They understand themselves. I know that if I do my best work in the morning, and so I really try as best as I can to protect the morning hours for writing and for thinking. And I know that I need an environment that's quiet and away from people. Other people are different. Some people work really well in coffee shops with all the noise and all the hecticness. Some people work very well late at night. All of that is fine. There's no one way to learn. But we do want students to learn how they learn best and develop good habits that maximize their capabilities. They should have lots of learning strategies that fit different tasks. When I was young, I had one learning strategy: read what the teacher gave me. And for a while, that worked. I'm seeing nodding heads, good. For a while, that worked. But eventually, that strategy no longer worked. And in that moment, I was lost. I didn't have other strategies to try. I did not have other tools in my strategy tool belt. We can teach students different kinds of strategies so that when they struggle, they have some other tool to pull out and use. We can help students learn to pay attention while they are studying so that they understand, hey, I feel like I'm struggling. What do I do here? They should be able to notice that, and we can teach them how to do that. When things go well, we want students to recognize things are going well and note that. And when they're struggling, they should note that too, so they know what to change in the future. And finally, we want students that work well with other students and with their teachers. These are all things that comprise self-regulated learning, thoughtful, active, good decisions. We can teach students how to do this. We can support them in doing so, and it is effective. And self-regulation applies all the way out into the work life and careers. When a worker can adjust to major changes in their job and find ways to thrive, that is self-regulation. We can train our students to become experts in their field who can adapt to any technology, including generative AI and anything else that comes along in the future. These former students, now workers, will be ready to adapt to new technologies because they know how to be active, they know how to be agentic, they know how to be planful, they know how to be reflective. They know their own unique advantages, the very human parts of work that will never go away, that are so important, that can augment generative AI or other technologies and help them maximize their capabilities. I don't mean to come across as overly optimistic. Learning can be challenging. Work can be challenging. New technologies can be challenging. But we can prepare students with the tools that they need to face those challenges, understand the difficulties they'll encounter, and persist to be successful. This is a model of self-regulated learning. You don't need to pay attention to the details here. If you want to use the QR code, it will take you to an article, very readable, written for practitioners about self-regulated learning. But I want to highlight just a few things. First of all, Barry Zimmerman, who came up with this model, one of the progenitors of self-regulated learning theory, talked about how many students just start a task. They are asked to complete a problem set, and they just start trying to do it. What he argued, and what I think is very wise of him, is that first, self-regulated students should sit down and engage what he called the forethought phase, or what we might call the before learning phase. Students should ask themselves, what am I asked to do here? What does my teacher want me to do? What's a good plan for achieving it? And how's my motivation right now? Do I need to motivate myself somehow? Do I need to promise myself an ice cream cone after this? Do I need to promise myself some time on TikTok afterwards? That's what my daughter would want. Whatever the case may be, they know how to do that well. During the performance phase, or what we might call the during learning phase, as they're doing the work, we want students that will notice when things don't go well. They should notice when it's just not as fluid as it should be. And in those moments, we want them to have strategies to pivot. We want them to know, for example, I read this chapter and I always just highlight things, but I'm realizing I'm not really understanding. Let me stop. Let me move back a couple pages. Let me start taking some notes. Let me see if that will help. We want students that can do that during learning. And then in the self-reflection phase, or after learning, we want students that will take a moment, not just rush off to go do whatever they want to do, but take a moment and say, what worked well? What should I keep doing next time I have to do a problem set or read a chapter? What didn't work so well? What do I need to kind of set aside? And we want them to make good attributions, right? We want them, when things go well, to attribute their success to hard work and effort, and not attribute their success or their failure to something inside them that they cannot change. Self-regulated learning must be taught and learned. It is not rocket science, but it is not intuitive. There may be some students here who have learned how to do this on their own, and if so, that is wonderful, and I'm happy for them. The vast majority of students need to be taught how to self-regulate their learning, not just in one context, but multiple contexts. And the more contexts in which they learn to self-regulate, the more likely they will be to continue to self-regulate in new contexts. But it has to be taught and reinforced. And thankfully, we have a lot of good options for helping students learn how to do this. So we know how to help students create and sustain good habits. Here is a graph that I really like from a book called Atomic Habits that says if you work to get 1% better every day, at the end of a year, you will be, I think it's 37% or 37 times better than where you were when you started. Whereas if you get 1% worse each day, you will be only 3% of where you were when you started at the beginning of the year. So we want to talk to students about building those little habits that add up over time. We want them to develop a growth mindset, as your minister mentioned earlier in the video, an incredibly important way of viewing oneself and the world. We want students to think that their mind is a muscle and that with effort it can improve. I love what I do for lots of reasons. One of them is I truly believe that just about every student has what they need to be successful for them in their life. We just need to help them maximize their potential. And growth mindset is one of the first steps to doing that. We can help students find motivation and value in their learning, even when they don't see it themselves. For whatever reason, history class was just never my favorite. Maybe it's American history that I don't like so much. I don't know. But for whatever reason, it wasn't my favorite. But I understood its value, I understood its importance, and I was able to positively motivate myself in a number of ways. We can teach students how to set effective goals and plans. We can help them learn effective strategies. We can help them learn how to monitor and control their learning, like the airport that Ulrich showed earlier. We can help them develop positive attributions for success and failure. And we can help them seek help effectively. So unlike me in the Frankfurt airport, just begging someone from Deutsche Bahn to take my hand and lead me to the train, we can teach students how to ask for help in ways that helps them ensure that in the future they won't need that help. So you see these are all hyperlinked. At the end of my talk, I'm going to give you a QR code where you can download all these slides, and these hyperlinks will work, and you can go to the places that have these interventions. I'll give you an example of one. This is an example of what's called a strategic mindset intervention developed by Dr. Patricia Chen and her colleagues. A strategic mindset is an orientation toward frequently asking oneself questions that elicit the access and use of task-appropriate methods. The idea is this: we can teach students good strategies, but if students don't think to use them, then those strategies are not very helpful. And teaching students a strategic mindset involves convincing students that being strategic is a good thing. So we can show them pictures of others, famous people they might admire, who displayed a strategic mindset, and then giving students examples of what they can ask themselves when they encounter difficulty, such as you see here. So these are two examples of materials that Dr. Chen has developed for her intervention, and that intervention has had a positive effect upon academic achievement, giving students not just a toolbox of strategies to use, but also the questions to ask themselves when they encounter difficulty. As I have mentioned frequently, self-regulation should be taught and promoted in every class, often. I wish it was the case that I learned something the first time someone told me. Sadly, that is not true for me, and it is not true for most people. And so teachers, educators, parents, families need to repeat these lessons to students. Students might become very self-regulated in mathematics class and not think that those strategies and tools work well in their history class or their informatics class. Teachers should be reinforcing this throughout the school and displaying and modeling, as Dr. Jones said, how to do this work. There is nothing more powerful, in my opinion, than when a teacher says, "Oops, I made a mistake. My apologies. Let me try to figure out what I did here. Where did I make an error? Let me look at it. Oh, I see the error. That's great. Okay, I found the error. I'm going to fix it. Let's keep going." That kind of modeling of a good attitude towards making a mistake, of showing good strategies for figuring out what the mistake was and how to solve it, and then showing that once that error was found, that it's a positive thing that they can feel pride in, that's great modeling to help students begin to feel like the mistakes they make are not something that they should be ashamed of, but a normal part of life, and they should be proud of how they respond to them. We have interventions and professional development to help teachers promote positive environments where self-regulation is more likely to happen and more likely to be positive and effective. So, again, some links that you can download at the end and take a look at, but we know how to create positively motivating classrooms. We understand how to promote a growth mindset. We know how to model effective self-regulated learning. Oh, sorry about that. And we understand how to put these things together. Teachers have so much to do. It is such a complicated task. It is so demanding. It takes true expertise to become a teacher. And what we want to do is give them the tools so that they can internalize these strategies for effective self-regulation, so it becomes second nature to them, so they can focus on our students and what they're trying to teach. We know how to do that. Here is an example of how we might create a positive environment for self-regulated learning. Some of you may be aware of a theory called self-determination theory. If you're not, I'm not going to bore you with a lot of details, but suffice it to say, as I mentioned earlier, some people are intrinsically motivated about something. Psychology. I'm intrinsically motivated about psychology. If my teacher just leaves me alone, I will be fine. Other people are not intrinsically motivated about psychology. My son was not particularly intrinsically motivated about psychology, even though both his parents were psychologists. Or now that I think about it, maybe because both his parents are psychologists. In any case, when teachers can create an environment where students' basic needs are met, they are more likely to be positively motivated. And those basic needs, there are three. The first is called autonomy. People should feel like they have some sense of choice and agency in an environment. We can teach teachers how to do that. Students should feel like they are competent, that they have been given the information and tools they need to be successful. We can help teachers do that. And students need to feel like they are connected, that they belong to their teacher and the other students in the classroom. We can help teachers learn how to do that well. There is a cliche phrase or saying in the United States that I think is true, and that is, no one cares how much you know until they know how much you care. Students need to feel like their teacher cares about their success. That is that sense of relatedness. When teachers communicate to students that they have autonomy, competence, and that they are related or feel belongingness, those students will be positively motivated. They may not develop intrinsic motivation, and that's okay, but they will be positively motivated to succeed. So, I'm going to revise my provocation just a little bit. I believe that educators can prepare students to be irreplaceable in the generative AI future by teaching and promoting self-regulation. But you may be asking yourself, gosh, this seems like a lot. This seems like a lot to ask teachers to do. And so I want to talk to you briefly before I end about something that we've been doing at the Center for Learning Analytics at the University of North Carolina, Chapel Hill. When I say we, I mean myself and my colleague, Matthew Bernanke. How can educators identify and support students who are struggling to self-regulate their learning? So we have been using learning analytics, AI techniques, to teach self-regulated learning. It can be difficult to know when students are struggling. So in a class of 20 students or 30 students, it can be tough for a teacher from day to day to have a good connection with every student. That can be very, very difficult. Right now, it's hard for me to have a good connection with all 150 of you, despite my best attempts. I would love to know which of you are currently struggling to self-regulate your attention right now and try to help you. It's difficult for me to know. Well, we can use digital technology to understand students' learning and identify which students are struggling and then get them the help they need to be successful. And this involves using digital technology data. So, many of our students use technology at some point throughout the day. The younger the student, in my belief, the less they should be using technology, but as they get older, it can become more of a useful tool. And when they do, they create all kinds of data. So if they're using a learning management system like Canvas, or they're using a digital textbook from Pearson, for example, or they're using various discussion boards, etc., all of that produces data. When someone logs in, how long they look at a page, what they click on, what they don't click on. All of that data comes into the school and very often just kind of floats away. What if we could capture that data? What a rich source of understanding. What if we could put all that data into one data set and then use learning analytics to understand what students are doing? And I want to emphasize the word doing there. These digital data give us a sense of what students are doing, and then we can look. Maybe some students are progressing well, and they are seeming to do everything that we know leads to success. Wonderful. Let's leave them alone. But maybe some students are struggling. We can determine, based upon their interactions with these data, if a student is struggling, and then we can reach out and offer them support. In one example, we've been using the data students produce as they learn and the hybrid intelligence that we bring to understand their behaviors, predict their achievement, and provide support to those who need it before they begin to significantly struggle. So at the University of North Carolina, Chapel Hill, we've been working with instructors in our Biology 101 course. And we can predict which students will get an A or a B, and that's a grade that they need to continue in their major, or get a C or worse with 80% accuracy after just 3 class meetings. This is before the first exam. And I can tell you, as someone that struggled in my first semester of college, I failed my first exam and I thought it was all over. And luckily, I had people that cared about me and helped me realize it wasn't, and I could recover. But I would have loved if someone had reached out to me before that first exam and said, hey, Jeff, it seems like maybe you're having some difficulty. Can we help you? That's what we can do with digital trace data. And I want to stress here, it's about what students are doing, not who they are. I am sure those of you that work in schools have been contacted by companies that say things like, if you just tell us where your student was born, what their parents look like, maybe how much the money they make, we can predict who's going to struggle. I am absolutely against that. First of all, that's a very crude way to understand students. Second of all, I can't do anything about where a student was born, or what they look like, or how much money their parents make. I can do something about how they are learning, what they are doing. And so in our work, we do not use any demographic data to understand or predict student success. We only use the data that students generate themselves when they interact with these environments. And importantly, that data is always with their consent. And we have a series of science of learning to learn interventions that can help them increase their self-regulated learning performance. And these interventions often help students improve their performance up to a grade. So a C becomes a B becomes an A. So I don't have a lot of time here, but I want you to know that we've been partnering with our colleagues at the Hector Research Institute to translate these interventions into German. So I don't think the audio is going to be happening, but trust me, it's all been converted to German. And we're excited to try this out in a number of different environments for K through 12 students. So, to wrap up, I believe self-regulation in education is the foundation of success for school, work, and life. So we've been hearing that AI is going to replace students and people at home, in schools, in the workplace. I think that humans will always be essential to success if they are agentic. We can help students be agentic through self-regulation in education. We can help students succeed in school and in the workplace via teaching them self-regulated learning through interventions, by having teachers that understand how to promote and teach it, and that we can also use learning analytics to support students in a multitude of ways and help reduce the burden on teachers. And so again, my revised provocation is that educators can prepare students to be irreplaceable in the generative AI future by teaching and promoting self-regulation. Thank you for your time and attention.